Episode 12 of Pathways Plus is brought to you by Maddie Eggett, Isaac and Ellie Faldmo, and supporters like you. For more information, go to www.pathwaystoenglish.org.
Hi, welcome to episode 12 of Pathways Plus. Today we will be talking about two different biomes, temperate forests and taiga forests. Now, last time we talked about biomes, we talked about rainforests and deserts. So this time we're talking about two different biomes. If you have a pencil or pen and piece of paper, go ahead and get it out to write notes and to do your lab work on. Let's slide to our learning target. Go ahead and read the learning target with me. Ready? I am learning about temperate forests and taiga forests. Now let's slide to our keywords for today. Our first keyword for today is coniferous. Now say that with me. Ready? Coniferous. Coniferous is a type of tree. So we have coniferous trees, and these trees are different from a tree that has these broad leaves and these leaves that you can kind of rip off. Coniferous trees are trees that have these pine type of leaves, so these needle leaves. So if you think of a Christmas tree is a coniferous tree because it has those little pine leaves. We have different types of trees. If you look at the picture here, you can see that this is not a coniferous tree because these leaves are these flat, broad leaves, where coniferous trees, their leaves are these little needles, like a Christmas tree. Okay, awesome. So our next keyword for today is compare. Now compare, if you're going to compare two things, you are going to talk about what is the same. So what is the same between a cat and a dog? They both walk on four legs, they have tails, they have eyes. And what's different about a cat and a dog? So we just compared them, and now we're going to our next keyword, contrast. Now contrast is when we say what is different. So if we're going to contrast a cat and a dog, what is different? A cat goes meow and a dog barks, right? We have lots of differences between a cat and a dog. Awesome. So now let's slide to our goals for today. Go ahead and read these learning goals with me. So learning goal number 1 is I can describe the characteristics of temperate forests and taiga forest. Now, remember, by the end of the lesson, we want to be able to describe the different characteristics. This is our goal for the end of the lesson. Characteristics are the things that make something what it is. So we've talked about characteristics before, but a characteristic of me would be I am tall, or I have brown hair. So I have different characteristics of myself. You might have characteristics of yourself that are different or the same. So characteristics, we need to look for what are the things that make these forests what they are. The second learning goal for today is I can compare and contrast temperate forests and taiga forests. So remember, we need to say what's the same about these two forests and what's different about these two forests. Let's slide for a quick review before we get into temperate forests and taiga forests. Okay, so last time we talked about the difference between biomes and ecosystems. So remember, biomes are very broad. We have lots of different deserts all around the world. Those are different biomes. That's one biome, the desert biome. But then in a specific place, a specific desert, that's the ecosystem. Because you might have different animals in a desert in Africa and a desert in North America. It's the same biome because it has a lot of similarities, but the ecosystem is more specific. Okay, now that we've reviewed that, let's slide to learn about taiga and temperate forests. Now this is a great time to get out your pencil and piece of paper and start writing some notes, because you will need some notes for your lab work today. So go ahead, get out your pencil and piece of paper. Now I'm going to start writing my notes up here if you need a little help. So I'm going to write temperate. I'm going to draw a line, and that temperate means temperate forest, and taiga. Okay. All right, so first we're going to talk about temperate forests. Now temperate forests are located halfway between the equator and the poles. So I'm just going to kind of draw a picture of that just so you get an idea. And I'm going to erase this in a second, but here's our globe, and here's the equator. We've talked about the equator before. The equator is that imaginary line, meaning it's not real, but the line that's right in the middle that cuts the Earth in half. And remember, it's really hot. The closer you get to the equator, the hotter it is. So you have the equator, and remember the rainforests are located along the equator, okay? So I'm going to draw X's for rainforest, if you can see this. So think rainforests are close to the equator. And now temperate forests are, I'm going to draw O's for temperate forests, are more in between the top. Here are the poles. So here's the North Pole, the South Pole, are located right in between them. So here's the equator, the poles. Here's where your temperate forest would be, right in between the poles and the equator. When we talk about taiga forests, I'll get to it. Taiga forests are going to be closer to the poles, like right here and right here. But temperate forests are these O's, right in between the poles and the equator. Okay, so maybe write that down. Where's the location of temperate forests? In between the poles and the equator. Okay, let's slide and learn some more. The word temperate actually means medium or kind of normal. So temperate forests, the weather there is very normal. It's not super, super hot. It's not super, super cold. Like rainforests are a lot hotter, and taiga forests are a lot colder. But temperate forests are right in the middle. So they have all 4 seasons, which means they have distinct times where it's hot, a distinct time where it's warm, a distinct time where it's cool, and a distinct time where it's cold. Which means because they have these 4 seasons, they only have a 3-month winter. So just about 3 months of the time where nothing really can grow. During winter time when it's really cold and snowing, not a lot of things can grow. But that time period is pretty short for temperate forests. It's about 3 months. So they have a lot of time where things are able to grow. So they are able to grow a lot of different things here in temperate forests. Now, not as much as rainforests, because rainforests don't really even have a winter, where temperate forests do have a winter, but it's not very long. So temperate forests have 4 seasons and mild temperatures. So they have all different types of temperatures, but it's very normal, medium. It's not extreme hot or extreme cold. So go ahead and write some notes down. I'll go through what I've written down. I started by writing located between the poles and equator. Remember, your notes do not need to be complete sentences, just things that you can remember what temperate forests are all about, okay? So I'm going to say mild weather. If mild is a hard word, maybe say medium. Mild weather. And I'm going to say 4 distinct. Distinct means you know the difference between them. There's definitely a fall where it's very different than the winter. The winter is different than the spring, and the spring is different from the summer. 4 distinct seasons. Now, for example, in Haiti, you do not have 4 distinct seasons because you don't have a time where it snows or it's really cold. You have probably 2 major seasons where it's rainy for one part and then maybe more dry and not as rainy. But it's always very hot, right? Because Haiti's close to the equator. Okay, so 4 distinct seasons, mild weather. Let's slide to learn some more. Now, temperate forests gets lots of rain. They get about 30 to 60, why can I say 60? Okay. Temperate forests gets lots of rain. They get about 30 to 60 inches of rain per year. So that's quite a bit. A little less than rainforest, but still a lot of rain. This makes it so the soil is very fertile. Fertile means it has the ability to grow a lot of things. Okay, so we have good soil. The soil is good. And another reason that it's good is because of the 4 seasons. It's not always really cold, where when the ground is really cold, it's harder for things to grow. It has very great soil. Another reason it has good soil is the trees that are grown there, and we'll talk a little more about that, but sometimes they have coniferous trees, but mostly they have broadleaf trees or deciduous trees. And these trees, they drop their leaves in the fall. So you can see leaves on the ground in the fall, and these leaves that rot on the ground help the soil to grow more things. So if you only have coniferous trees, that soil isn't going to be as fertile. But when you have deciduous trees, it helps the ground become more fertile so more things can grow. Okay, why don't you go ahead, write some notes. I'll write some notes with you. So I'm going to write 30 to 60 inches of rain. And I'm also going to write good soil, because that helps me remember that a lot of different plants can grow here. Okay, awesome. Let's slide to the next slide. Just like I said before, temperate forests have different types of trees, and it can have both coniferous trees and broadleaf trees. So broadleaf trees, another name for that is deciduous trees. Coniferous trees we'll talk about, but they're also found in taiga forests. They're the trees with the needles that drop, where the broadleaf trees have the big leaves. So these trees, the broadleaf trees or deciduous trees, their leaves drop during the fall because they have the 4 seasons. Okay, so this picture is a picture more of coniferous trees. So you can see how the trees some of them kind of look like Christmas trees, and they have those little needles. But if we slide to another picture, this picture you can see all the leaves falling. That means it is a deciduous tree because they have these broad leaves, which means they're flat and bigger, that fall to the ground during fall or when it starts to get a little colder. And remember, those leaves start to rot and they help the ground, the soil in the ground, so more things can grow. So we have maple trees, oak trees, all different types of trees here in the temperate forests. Redwood, pine, oak, elm. You can have lots of different types. And maybe if you go to a colder ecosystem, remember ecosystem and biome's a little different. You're still in a temperate forest biome. If it's a little colder, there's probably more coniferous trees, where if you go to a little warmer temperate forest, you might have more broadleaf trees. Awesome. Let's write some notes down. So you can say both coniferous, that's kind of a hard word, huh? Coniferous and broadleaf trees. Okay. Now, let's slide and we'll talk about the animals. The animals found in temperate forest, there's lots of different animals, but I just picked about 3 that are found. So we have squirrels, and as you can see in this picture, squirrels are those little rodents that have the furry tails. And in the winter, it's colder, so they have these adaptations to help them survive the winter. Temperate forests also have brown bears. Now during the winter, they hibernate, which means they are in a cave. During the winter, they're not out and about. It's cold during the winter, so they stay in their own cave and sleep during the winter. Okay, and then our last animal is a wolf. And wolves also have that thick fur. So if we look, all three of those animals, squirrels, brown bears, and wolves, they all have that thick fur, and that helps them in the winter to adapt. So adapt means to change. So when it's really cold, they have that thick fur that helps them to be able to survive in the winter. But remember, the temperate forests have a short winter. So that period of time when they either are hibernating or they need that adaptation is a lot shorter than taiga forest, which we will talk about. Okay, so let's go ahead and write some notes for the animals. We're going to write squirrels and bears and wolves. And I want to put a little arrow, and I'm going to write adapt, A-D-A-P-T, because these animals are all animals that have to be able to adapt when it starts to get cold for that 3 months. Whether they're hibernating or they have a thick layer of fur that keeps them warm, they still have to be able to adapt because rainforests, they're hot all the time, or they're a very similar temperature most of the time, where temperate forests are cold and hot throughout the year. So one part of the year, it's really cold, so they need to have that adaptation to make sure they're ready for the cold. Awesome. Let's slide and we'll start learning about taiga forests. Taiga forests are located in the north. So remember the picture I drew you. I'll draw it one more time, really quick. Here's our equator, here's our poles, here's our rainforest right by the equator where it's super duper hot. Here's our temperate forest where it's kind of medium. Remember, temperate means medium or mild. And then up by the poles, we have the taiga forest. So it's located in the north, more in the north, okay? And we have places like Canada, Alaska, Scandinavia. Scandinavia is like Sweden and Norway. These are all places that are cold for a lot of the year. Okay, so taiga forests have cold, cold weather. It's not very warm here. It's cold for a majority of the year. In fact, almost the whole time, the whole year, except for a few months of a little bit of warm, it is winter type weather where it's really cold. It is also very dry. So just like a desert, it does not get a lot of rain. So a desert has the least amount of rain out of all the biomes, but then the next least amount of rain is a taiga forest. And a taiga forest only sees about 12 to 30 inches of rain per year. Since that's not a lot of rain, think about the plants that are going to be living there. Are there going to be a lot of plants that are living there or not really? There's not going to be a lot of types. There's not going to be many types of plants because it doesn't have the necessary amount of water or the good soil that a lot of plants need to grow. So let's slide to what's next. Okay, before we start talking about what's next, I just want to update you on what I've written for my notes. So I've talked about the location. It's located in the north where it is colder. It's cold and dry, and it only sees about 12 to 30 inches of rain per year. So those are my notes. If you need to pause it and write some of your own notes, go ahead, but this is what I have. Now, just like I said before, it has a very short growing season. There's such a long winter because it's up north where it's very, very cold for most of the year. So the growing season is not very long. I've put a picture up of a time where it is the growing season, but as you can see, what type of trees do we have? Coniferous trees. And we'll talk about that later when we talk about the plants, but just know that we don't have a very long growing season because we have a very long winter. The soil is very, very thin. Because you have coniferous trees, you don't have these broad leaf trees that drop their leaves and the leaves rot and make the soil better. And the soil is also very cold, or when the soil is too cold, it's hard for things to grow in it. It's really hard, so it's not as soft, so it's hard for things to grow. So we have a short growing season and very thin soil. So not a lot of plants can grow here. Think about the rainforest has the most amount of plants. Temperate forest has the middle, Taiga forest has the least amount of plants that can grow. Let's slide to see what plants are growing here. So just like I said before, the plants that grow here are coniferous trees, or the trees that have those little needles, just like Christmas trees. So these trees don't need the nutrients or the great soil like other trees do need in temperate forests and rainforests. So the plants that grow here are coniferous trees. Remember, those are just like the Christmas trees, where they have those little pine needles or the little needles on the trees. The animals found in taiga forests are actually very similar to temperate forests. One of the animals are squirrels, and we talked about squirrels in temperate forests. If you've seen squirrels, a lot of times they'll have lots of little nuts that they gather for food for the winter. So they need adaptations. They need to be able to have fur or different behavior traits that help them survive the winter. Same thing with bears. They have the thick fur that helps them survive the cold temperatures. And then we have moose. And moose are also found in some temperate forests, but moose have thick fur and adaptations that help them survive in the cooler temperatures or the very cold temperatures. Now I just want to go over some of the notes that I've written for taiga forest. So we talked about the amount of rain and how it's cold and dry. I also talked about how they have long winters and a short growing season. So remember, the winters are really, really long and the time where they can grow things is short. So that makes it difficult to grow a lot of different plants. They do not have good soil. They have coniferous trees. And then some of the animals are bears, squirrels, and moose. Okay, so now let's slide to go over your lab work for today. For your lab work today, you're going to create a Venn diagram, which I'll show you in a second, that shows the similarities and differences between temperate forests and taiga forests. So you're comparing and contrasting. So if you look at the board, I have created a Venn diagram. So all you need to do is make 2 circles, and those circles are going to overlap in the middle, okay? Now, anything that is different about temperate forests, for example, something that taiga forests don't have. I'll give you one example. They have 4 seasons. Temperate forests have 4 seasons, where taiga forests have long winters, right? So these are, everything that's different goes on the outside circles, or the outside parts of the circle, okay? So temperate forest, everything that's different, or when you contrast, anything that's different goes on these outside. Taiga, anything that's different goes on the outside. Anything that is the same would go on the inside. So for example, you can grow coniferous trees in both. Coniferous trees. This is something found in both. So this is anything that's similar. So you're comparing in the middle, contrasting on the outside, temperate forest and taiga forests. So this is your lab work. You want to fill it in as much as you can. Use your notes and fill in this Venn diagram. Now let's slide and review our learning target for today. Now go ahead and read the learning target with me. Ready? I am learning about temperate forests and taiga forest. Awesome. Let's slide and self-assess. Give yourself a 3 if you feel very confident about these 2 forests, temperate and taiga forests, and you could even teach someone about temperate and taiga forests. Give yourself a 2 if you feel pretty good about it, but you're a little confused about a few things. And give yourself a 1 if you are very confused, you do not know the difference between temperate forests and taiga forests, and you need to review this lesson again. Remember, all 3 are great. The best thing about it is that it's your self-assessment. It's what you feel like you know. So be honest with yourself, help each other out. If someone around you is a little confused, help them out, teach them. Ask people around you for help. Awesome job today, you guys. We will see you next time on Pathways Plus.